Hey everyone, sorry to interrupt, but this is the cheesy podcast bit that gets on everyone's nerves, but it's really important to me. Please, if you can like the channel and also subscribe, it helps me a lot to get the best guests in the world for you guys. So click like and subscribe. Appreciate it. Thanks. Join me, Raoul Pal, as I go on a journey of discovery through the macro, crypto, and exponential age landscapes. In The Journeyman, I talk to the smartest people in the world so we can all become smarter together.
I think AI has so many different applications that unfortunately this industry happened before AI. So we need to change this industry to an AI-enabled industry, both in terms of apps we're building, product tools, customer support, risk management, risk monitoring, and also AI itself can use blockchain. Right. So I think, as I said, tweeted before, the currency for AI is crypto. AI is not going to swipe a card, enter SMS code. That doesn't work for AI. It's going to be crypto. So, and then AI needs a lot of data to train. Today, they exhausted the public data, but there's a lot of data we don't capture today. Those data can be captured in a privacy-preserving way using blockchain. But if you give those data to a third-party company, then you can't ensure your own data sovereignty. So capturing of data, it logically should be done on the blockchain. But today, it's easier technology-wise to do it on a centralized platform. So we will hope to see that transition happen. And then today, many people, there's so many different AI agents with a token. But the agents don't have a lot of utility, right?
It's experimentation still right now.
So what I would really want to see is like real agents that have real utility, like that can really help you, that have tokens. So today, there's so many platforms. You go to AI token launch platform, you click a button, you get your own AI with your own name. Takes 3 seconds, and then you have your own token. That token is useless. Well, I would say 99.99999% of those tokens are useless. There may be one or two for sentimental value, for culture value, for other things. But what we want to see is real AI agents that can do things. Like, today the big ones like, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, etc. Those are real big AIs that can do a lot of stuff. There's smaller AI than those guys that can do a lot of stuff that, video editing, image editing. And I've just seen a demo of an AI literally paying for hotel booking. But today those AI have to go through a website. Hopefully in the future that it should be AI talking to AI to book that, right? So I think in the future we will see a very heavily automated world. I think I was talking to a fund manager yesterday. They say of 8 billion people in the world, of the data that we generate every day, it's about 300 trillion tokens. Like token meaning not the crypto token, meaning the words for AI tokens. Today, AI is generating about 10% of that today.
Wow.
In the future, though, AI will generate 10 times more than we do. So when we have AI will interacting with each other. There'll be so many exchanges in the tokens, in the word tokens, or in the interactions. And then there will be more commerce. The AI will be trading with each other. They will be paying each other. They will be transacting. They will use crypto. So
I've talked a lot about this. Is people don't realize right now the agents are being essentially subsidized by VC capital in these large AI companies. Over time, agents need to get paid for compute and electricity. And it happens at lightning speed. And the only way of doing that payment is crypto payments. And then they will be building their own businesses, of which they'll build in profit margins as well. I mean, it's a strange world where we may not be the profit drivers. We may not be the economic engine. They'll come from the AI.
Absolutely. I think that day is coming. Like with AI, so far in our world, population is related to productivity. So the higher the population, the more GDP, etc. But with AI plus robotics, or plus robots, that's going to change. So whichever country has the best economy or manufacturing and AI technologies, AI plus robots plus blockchain, they don't need that many people. So the productivity equation is going to change. So it's innovation that matters. In the future world, I think we can live a much more comfortable life with much less work, how we should be.
Yeah, I think there's this whole nexus of AI and crypto is very interesting. The other part of AI that people don't understand yet is if we're not careful, we're going to have 2 or 3 giants, and we need decentralization within that industry too. And I think blockchain plays a role in that. Have you any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So today, the big AI companies use our internet data to train their models, and that happens to be with a few large internet companies, Microsoft, Google, whoever else. But going forward, as I said before, there's a lot of data that we don't store. And now we're going to be smarter about how we store our data. So they should be stored in a permission way that we only allow access when we want to, and we should be able to monetize out of it. So your health data, you can be anonymized and then used to train different AIs. Every interaction you have, every thought you have, etc. If you want to, you should be able to digitize that, blockchain, tokenize it, and then be able to monetize it. So in the future, I think and also we're seeing I think we'll give credit to the first few centralized platforms that have the scale to innovate. But once the industry is proven, then the decentralization will happen. We've seen that with DeepSeek. They open source their model, and now everyone can use that at a fraction of the cost. So I think we're going to see more and more of that coming. So I think the future is going to be quite decentralized.
Yeah, it's also interesting because crypto's the fastest moving industry most of us had ever seen until AI came along, and now it's multiplied the whole thing.
Hi, Raoul here. Listen, I think we've got until 2030 before the economic singularity arrives. Now, it might not be the exact date, but it's around then. So we have about 6 years to figure out how to unfuck our future. I've put together a report to help you called Prepare for 2030. It's going to help you take the first steps in that journey to make sure you're secure past 2030. So just click on the link below and start your journey now.
Your argument about NFTs is that they will outperform everything because they're priced in ETH and not in dollars, right? Yeah. ETH has been extremely painful asset to hold for the last 2 years. I mean, thanks to you, I don't, because I also followed you on the Sol trade in 2023. ETH is down bad in USD terms and even more down bad in BTC terms. What happens to our beloved JPEGs, pictures, or arts if ETH is forever cooked? There is a possibility that ETH is forever cooked.
There is a probability, and we'll talk about ETH in a sec. If it is not cooked forever, and let's say it finishes this cycle up 5x or whatever from here, or 3x or whatever, 2x, doesn't matter, and you've managed to buy art in a low ETH price, you will make a multiple on that. And if people make money, they'll buy art, so the art starts outperforming ETH. So you've got this double kicker that's available, which is why there's been a lot of sales recently, because in dollar terms, it got cheap recently, as ETH fell in this correction that we've just had. So there's been a lot of dollar buyers, not ETH buyers, because not that many people hold a lot of ETH anymore because of the same reasons. We switched for other stuff. So let's talk about ETH. What is the probable outcome? ETH's cooked. All the developers were wrong. This massive ecosystem, they fucked it up with the layer 2s. Nothing accrues. What's the point? It's all broken. Solana's going to take everything. Okay, I hear that narrative. My narrative is they've overbuilt capacity for what the system needs right now. They will adjust some of the accrual mechanism back to the layer 1. But EVM is Microsoft. Every bank, every insurance company, every major company in the world uses Microsoft. Not Apple and not Google. Why is that? Because you don't get fired. And once it's in, and somebody explained this to me yesterday, it was a really interesting thing. It's like once you have enterprise sales model, it is almost impossible to extract it from a business, which is why banks are still using Cobalt. And it's because you don't want to change it because it's working and you've learned how to do it. And nobody wants to take the risk of saying, oh, the whole company, we're going to turn to X now. So if you think of Ethereum as gone through its Lindy effects, it clearly works very well for what the financial markets need. They can build layer 2s, as Coinbase has shown, that can work perfectly for what their needs. If they need high security, they can use the layer 1 chain. They've got all the ZK stuff and all the other stuff that's being built
So everything is there. They've just got too much capacity. But if the finance system comes, they'll go there. Yeah, sure. There'll be stable coins and Sol and Sui and all of this stuff. But, is Goldman going to build on Solana? Highly unlikely. Is JP Morgan? Highly unlikely. And will they build their own layer twos? Highly likely. When I extrapolate trend rate of growth out of crypto, I get to something like $100 trillion within 10 years, which is not, would be in line with other asset classes. Even if I'm wrong by 50%, if it is 100 trillion, we're only 3% of the journey. But even if I'm wrong, it's still going to be the largest, fastest wealth generation event in all history. I think people aren't understanding how much capital is going to get formed in this and the uses of that capital. And, how it completely changes the game, as you talked about, of access to capital.
Yeah. Well, my prediction, this might be a little bit of a hot take because it's aggressive, but I think that technically what you're saying could happen, but I don't think it's going to be native crypto assets like we have them today. I think at some point we're going to flip a switch and, the securities markets will all be powered by crypto technology.
For sure.
It'll be almost like how technology as a sector has become
the
largest sector.
But because of the behavioral incentives of the protocol and how they use tokens, it's going to accrue to those tokens. So it's like, using AWS accrues to Amazon, but using Ethereum accrues to Ethereum token holders. So that's where the wealth generation comes. You can build the whole financial system on it, and we will for sure. That was I wrote the first ever strategy piece on crypto back in 2013. And this was my base case, is the entire financial system has to go on it. And I think that's true. But that increase in token value, it's a big deal.
Yeah. And you're saying that that'll increase, that'll accrue to the platform layer, the blockchain layer itself.
Yeah, it'll accrue to various layers because you have the applications layer and the infrastructure layer, essentially. It's just technology. Firstly, I use a framework that I call the everything code. It's something that I've spent 35 years building in macro, where I started to realize that the dominant factor in all of macro is actually liquidity and the debasement of currencies. And it explains most price movements in all of the assets that we care about. And I realized that it's all to do with debt. And it came from why we're seeing 4-year cycles in crypto and the economy and all of these things is actually driven by the debt refi cycle. The world just reached too much debt back in 2008. And what we've been doing since then is servicing the debt. We've also got some other key factors. This chart is a chart that I produced a few years ago. It's still the single most important chart in macro and explains everything that is going on in our world today. And this is the fact that demographics is everything. And the demographics of the aging populations across the Western world, these are the US numbers using the labor force participation rate, explain the buildup in debt. Why that is as populations get older, economies slow down. To service the existing debt, it requires more debt. To create GDP growth, you need more debt. See, GDP growth is driven by population growth, productivity growth, and debt growth. And debt growth has been the driver both in the US, in China, in Europe, in the UK, all across the world. It's all driven by the same dynamic, and that's this aging population thing. It slows down GDP growth and creates unstable economies. And that chart just shows the stunning correlation between debt to GDP and population itself. What's interesting is then when you go one stage further and say, okay, we're seeing this debt, how are we dealing with this debt? And it's actually just driven by liquidity. So here I'm using Fed net liquidity. Fed net liquidity is the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, the Treasury General Account, which is the Treasury themselves, not the Fed, and then the reverse repo facility. These are the levers that they've been using. It started just using the balance sheet, 2009, all the way through to about 2014. It was just the use of the balance sheet. Then they started sneaking in new ways of debasing currency, and that was by adding in these other levers, getting banks to put reserves here or take reserves out there, or injecting money into the economy via the checking account, the Treasury General Account. That's actually shifted to total liquidity now because everyone figures out the game, which is the debasement of currency, debase the currency, try and grow GDP growth and lower debt to GDP or just manage it. Now they're using total liquidity, which includes measures like M2, which is the banking system as well. So when you add those things up, this has, and I'll show you these charts later, the most stunning correlation of all time to all assets. So 90% of Bitcoin's price movements are driven by total liquidity, and 97% of the NASDAQ. So here's the real issue here. Why are the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer? Well, scarce assets keep going up in price. Real estate, equities, art, gold, all of these things. Young people can't afford it. Poor people can't afford it because they've got variable income, which is earnings, and it buys them less of these every year. What's actually happening, what that mechanism is a tax on everybody of 8% a year. A global taxation of 8% a year that you don't understand. You just don't get richer by 8% a year. Add in another 3% global inflation, you're at 11% debasement of currency. That's your hurdle rate to stay as wealthy as you are today. That's a staggeringly difficult thing, considering most asset classes don't produce those kinds of returns, which is why so many young people have come to crypto, because crypto completely upends this system. They can't buy houses. They can't buy all of the other things that older people were able to afford. So they forced into more speculative, high-risk assets that have much higher returns. It's the only way out of the trap. And the trap is driven by this debasement. So if you want to see how close the correlation is, and I'll show the full correlation chart later, it basically drives Bitcoin. And what we see is there's periods where it decouples, and these are the banana zones. It decouples when what we get is the retail frenzy and the frenzy into the market, cools off, comes back to trend rate of this debasement of 8% or so. But over time, it produces astonishing returns. And that's why Bitcoin looks like this on the log regression channel. It's also still remarkably cheap. Where it ends up at the end of the banana zone is usually the 1 or 2 standard deviation level. We're a long way from that, and that would give us much higher prices. You can't see it on this. But if it were to get to 2 standard deviations, that would put Bitcoin at $850,000. I don't think it's going to go there. But what we're saying is there's plenty of upside to come. I know people get frustrated in sideways markets. It's just the nature of the beast. It does nothing, corrects for a while, and then explodes out of the traps. And we're kind of in that phase now that I'll talk to you about.
Julian made this all very nice for me. Let's start with the dollar. Listen, the dollar is the largest, most important macro variable on Earth. Nothing comes close. The dollar is 87% of world trade. It's how the US adds and withdraws liquidity to the global system. It's how all commodities trade. It is the big daddy. And what we had is the dollar had been in a very sideways range for the whole of 23, 24, 25. Then it started weakening. It got the most oversold. It got 3 standard deviations oversold. And it's somewhat bounced since. Now, why do we care about that? Because every time it does this, the 12-month gain after a drop of that magnitude is huge. We had it in 2015. The NASDAQ gained 18%, 35% in 2022, and back in 2020, 61%. Things like a weak dollar. The global economy loves a weak dollar. China wants a weaker dollar. Everybody wants a weaker dollar. Scott Bessent wants a weaker dollar. Donald Trump wants a weaker dollar. A weaker dollar is the key to making the world go round. And when it happens, things like Bitcoin go apeshit. So the 12-month gain after a large drop in the dollar, 119%, 175%, 592%. These are big deals because the weaker dollar is a change in the denominator of most assets. The S&P 500, also after the DXY, tends to be a very positive thing. So the dollar weakening is hugely positive. And I'll come on to a bit of how this is replaying 2017. You've seen some of this before, but none of you actually listen to what I have to say. You watch it once, then you watch 17 other videos by stupid people reiterating stuff that we've done or inventing new stories. I keep trying to tell you the same things over and over and over again. You don't listen. Hopefully I've got you to drink finer wine. That'll be a start. Eat better food. That'll be a better start. And then eventually you might start listening to say, Raoul knows a bit about what he's talking about. He's not always right. I'm definitely not. But I kind of know a little bit of what I'm talking about. But no, you want to go on X and hear some guy saying it's the end of the world because that narrative makes you scared. And if it makes you scared, then you've got attention. The world trades off attention. And maybe when I come and say there's nothing to be scared about, attention goes away because it de-escalates people. And then you go back on X again and somebody goes, the world's going to end. And you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Raoul, save me. I'm like, there's nothing going on, guys. Nothing has changed. I've been telling you the same shit since the low in 2022. And luckily that's been like, God, that soft cheese is epic. I'm going to tell you again what it was. It was a Vermont Creamery, ash-ripened Bombouche, goat's milk, aged cheese from Websterville, Vermont. Guys, you make great cheese, whoever you are. Those are really good cheese. Okay. So, Trump came in 2017. The world freaked out. Oh my God, we've got this nutcase as a president. He's going to nuke everything. He's going to come with tariffs. He came in and said the dollar's too strong. Genius. Why? Because the dollar makes the world. And what happens is the dollar fell over the first year strongly. What happened this time? We said this before the dollar peaked. We said it's going to repeat the same cycle. And it did exactly as we said. And not only that, it's falling faster than last time around. And you see these wiggles. So this up move we had very similar up moves in the dollar as corrective moves back in 2017. And then it keeps moving lower. That moving lower is what is increasing global M2 because it's in dollars. It's also increasing or lowering financial conditions or increasing on our charts, which means financial conditions are getting easier for people because of the dollar. Foreign nations can roll their debts. Corporations can roll their debts. That means everybody has more dollars to spend. More excess spending equals a faster economic recovery, higher asset prices. So the dollar is in this beautiful cycle. The dollar should hit new lows again. And this little correction pattern is actually important because it plays into the M2 chart and the global liquidity chart, which in the end is what is the key driver of assets, which again, most people don't understand. They get caught out in some bullshit on Twitter. I've been trying to show you this stuff forever. Global M2. Global M2 is the real-time pricing approximation of total global liquidity. Total global liquidity is central banks included. This isn't, but we know what they're using the banking sector. Global M2 is rising faster than 2017. 2017, those of you who were in the market then, it was a hell of a year for risk assets. I mean, crypto from the low did a Bitcoin from the low did a 23x that year. Now, Bitcoin won't, but something will. One of the large tokens will do something approximating that. So liquidity gushing, dollar falling. All of those things, positive.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the ghost story one's great. I think everyone, if you ask them, they'll know someone. If they haven't had one themselves, they'll know someone that's had a wild ghost story that they can't explain.
Yeah, I mean, I had a house in Spain, and some friends of mine came from Singapore, and their kids were in a spare bedroom. They were in the main bedroom. One of the kids woke up in the middle of the night, jumped into their bed. So the mother went across to the kids' bedroom, went to sleep. She came down in the morning and said, is there a kid that ever lived here? And I said, as far as I know, the first person who owned the house had a child who died of leukemia or something. And she's like, came to see me last night. And I was like, what? And she said, a kid came to the foot of my bed. It was not my child, and tried to talk to me. And I'm like, wow. And we'd had weird things happening in that house. Like my neighbor would call me up from Spain when I was living in London saying, somebody's turning on your lights. I'm like, there's nobody there. We'd find things moved around the house, like a radio, and it'd be put by that kid's bed. And we were asking the person who'd look after the house, have you been there? Have you had a nap? What's going on? Nobody could ever explain it. it was never a bad thing. It was a thing. And it's like, after that, I'm like, okay, A, it freaks me out, but B, maybe there's something more than I understand.
Yeah, I mean, some of these, we always have to keep the, Occam's razor handy, right? So it's like, what's the most simple explanation for this? And it's probably the most likely. But there's always these spooky stories. There's one that happened to my brother, which is still probably the scariest and weirdest one, if you want to hear that.
Yeah, let's do it. I didn't think we were going to do ghost stories today, but this is what we're doing.
Neither. So my brother is a no-nonsense person, not particularly, not religious, not particularly into any spiritual or new age stuff at all. Very no-nonsense, business-minded kind of person. Awesome person. This was years and years ago, but basically him and through a series of different marriages, he has another brother. So him and his younger brother were at this old house. They were house sitting, one of their family members' house. And they're just chilling. It was a Tuesday night or Wednesday night. And they're watching TV. And apparently the TV channels just started changing by themselves on the TV. Oh, that's a bit weird. And each of them thought the other one had the remote, and was like fucking with the other guy, But they found the remote and that was fine. And they're, okay, I guess the TV's glitching out. It's fine. And then I think the TV turns off. A wardrobe falls over in one of the other rooms. All the stuff falls out. A microwave turns on and they unplug the microwave and it keeps going. And I need to get more of these details. Again, it's been a while since I've heard this story, but there was something about a pen in the house. A pen like flew across the house or something. And my brother picked up the pen because something about this pen was really weird and it was doing all sorts of crazy stuff. It was like proper kinetic, like proper scary, haunting kind of stuff. He threw this pen outside and they said, like, we're out of here. We're not safe in this house. So they go down to my brother's car and the pen was in the door handle. The tiny little door handle of the car sitting in the door handle. That was the weirdest one that I've ever heard. And I have no idea how to explain that. And again, it's from people there's certain people in my life that I love dearly, but if they told me stories about, okay, maybe the edges of their reality are a little too permeable. But with my brother, it's definitely not. So yeah, there's definitely edges to the world.
And how would you explain, because I think it's going to get into the aliens thing, because it's all the same kind of concept. What would you think of as ghosts? What are they? Because we've framed conversations about consciousness, quantum, all sorts of stuff in the past. So where would you put them in that? Is it explainable?
Well, again, in this last conversation, we talked about what is the fundamental nature of reality, right? Is it a dead material universe which consciousness arises from? Or is it consciousness is the ground of everything and then all this material stuff is almost like a video game engine that we use to interface with other conscious entities and the main consciousness itself? It's leaning towards that consciousness is the fundamental thing. That seems to be, the evidence is pointing a little more in that direction these days. So if that's our arena of ideas and of where we're kind of playing in, there's all sorts of different entities that can be interacted with through, maybe through ghost experiences that people have. Obviously, they happen when people have psychotic breaks and other, mental things. They happen through meditation. So anyone that's gone down the meditative path, really, really heavily, pretty much all of them have entity encounters and have visions and all sorts of things. There's obviously the psychedelic realm. So people that take the stronger psychedelics like DMT and stuff frequently see entities of all sorts of different types and ayahuasca and stuff like that. And then you've got the alien stuff. And then you've got the whole pantheon of gods, all the Hindu gods. You've got these Christian stories like the Wheel of Ezekiel and all these different other visions. So I think there's kind of like a whole arena of different entities. You've got Carl Jung's archetypal entities, which are different type of archetypes. You've got the tarot. There's all sorts of different things that kind of play. And to me, it's not entirely obvious that they're all external. So, given I've had some personal experience with those heavier psychedelics and also meditation, and I've had a pretty wild entity experience actually on DMT.
Explain.
But what's that?
Explain. Tell me.
Okay. This one's good. We can ride down the rabbit hole.
I've not done DMT, but I've been reading about it because, again, I think it's all connected somehow, and this is what I'm trying to figure out.
There are a few sort of exponential age times geopolitics things to get into this month, but one of the big things was Saudi Arabia announcing this humane AI, like just massive nationwide strategic push on AI. Hundreds of thousands of Nvidia chips, tens of billions of dollars a year. And, this is something we talked about at the GMI event in California, just how deeply MBS sort of gets it, right? Gets the exponential age. And you just sense a country now that knows the oil wealth is not going to last forever and ever, and is just making a massive strategic decision around intelligence and the exponential age. And it's really interesting to watch it.
We've probably all mid-curved Nvidia because we were assuming that there was going to be a boom-bust cycle because Microsoft and others will have pre-ordered what they're doing. But now we're seeing nation states with endless capital availability building yet more stuff. And I just can't see how that stock doesn't continue to really perform because it's at the epicenter of everything still, and that doesn't go away, and Taiwan semi being another.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we can gallop straight into the other really interesting thing this month. I mean, Jensen Huang was just speaking at Computex, the massive technology conference in Taiwan, right? And talking through the way NVIDIA sees AI, fascinating, this journey from AI to agents to physical AI, which he's talked about before. But if you just want an overview of where AI is heading, it's a brilliant talk. Announcing some really interesting stuff that we can get into, I really want to get into. But one of the big things he announced was a strategic partnership to build a massive AI supercomputer in Taiwan, right? So this is NVIDIA, the Taiwanese government, and TSMC all coming together to build, a world-leading AI supercomputer in Taiwan, right? And it just strikes me that really taps into all kinds of fascinating stuff. One of the things it taps into is this idea of a grand bargain that you and I have talked about before, that I think came out of the GMI event the year before last, right?
That's right.
You can just see how interwoven US AI companies and TSMC are becoming, to the point where outright conflict just becomes unthinkable. And it's like you can have TSMC factories in Arizona, but in return, US companies, basically Nvidia, need to agree to do hundreds of thousands of chips in Taiwan to do a world-leading AI supercomputer. And at some point, we know that these are going to break apart into spheres of influence, right? And we're kind of arranging that now. That's what it feels like to me. And we're going to be so woven through each other that outright conflict becomes unthinkable. It's really interesting to see the strategy play out. And cycling back to what you said, we have mid-curved it because, this is another kind of God knows how many other 100,000 Nvidia chips, right? So where's the boom and bust cycle when you have sovereign nations wading in like this?
Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. Look, if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button and check out the video here on the right-hand side. I'm sure you'll enjoy that one as well. And if you're ready for more, go to realvision.com/join. I'll see you there.